You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. This program is brought to you by Genesis Volatility, also known as GVOL, home of institutional-grade crypto options analytics. Whether you're trading CeFi options or DeFi options, cryptocurrencies move. Use GVOL Analytics to analyze implied volatility, model realized volatility, structure positions, and unlock alpha. For more information, visit gvol.io. That's GVOL.io.
All right, everybody. That music means it is time once again for the Crypto Rundown, the program here on the Options Insider Radio Network, where we bravely venture forth into the intersection, the world of all things crypto derivatives. Take the crypto world, it's already crazy. Add the derivatives layer on top of it. You get the tasty, delicious cocktail that is the Crypto Rundown. My name is Mark Longo from the optionsinsider.com, as well as, of course, from the aforementioned network, reminding you there's an influx of new people coming to the network and to the show every week and certainly month after month. We want to keep those people coming and, of course, give new listeners a place to turn. These are crazy times. These products are moving like mad. They need a place to turn. And quite frankly, there aren't many shows on the planet talking about the world of derivatives and crypto combined. So we want to make sure they have a place to turn. So keep rating and reviewing the show and indeed the network wherever you find this content. Also keep those questions and comments coming too. We do love to hear from all of you, even you hardcore, diehard holders out there. We love hearing from all of you folks out there. Let's see who we're hearing from today. We got, once again, joining us on the old Crypto Rundown program, our old friend, Mr. Bill ULIVIERI, the principal/owner over there at CENACLE Capital Management. Speaking of that intersection, that nexus of the old and the new, that's what Bill's doing over there at CENACLE. He is bridging the gap between traditional finance, so the old school world of your fixed income and your equities, and this new world of digital assets. Mr. Bill, welcome back to the Crypto Rundown program, sir.
Thank you, Mark, for having me. It's great to be back on.
We are happy to have you. A lot going on, so you picked a good one to come on to as we dive right on into the Bitcoin breakdown.
It's time to explore the latest trending activity, trends, and developments across the world's leading crypto market. It's time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Bitcoin Breakdown. This is where we break down all the action in the world's leading digital asset, aka Bitcoin, that has occurred over the past week since our last show, and quite a bit popping off since our last show. Pretty much during our last show, really last week is when things really started getting interesting. Of course, we saw Bitcoin and a lot of major crypto assets really having some struggles, shall we say, over the course of the past week. Coming into showtime right now, we're seeing Bitcoin right around the 48,000 and change up, about 48,300. That puts it down about almost 4,800 handles, a little bit north of that actually, from our last show last week. But in between episodes, in between shows, of course, we saw Bitcoin flirting with much lower levels, threatening a few times. It seemed like it might be threatening to break out of the 40,000 range, got down to 45,000, then rebounded, then it got back down to about 44,000 or so, and then rebounded, and then very recently got down to the 43,000 and change level. So it seemed like he had multiple periods where it was threatening to break back down shy of the 40,000. I know it seems crazy to say now, oh, how so low, below 40,000, whereas a month or two ago would have said how absurd it would be that it would be at 40,000, but that's where we find ourselves today. Listeners, of course, all this influx of, Tesla and Musk becoming big stakeholders in Bitcoin has kind of linked their fortunes. We saw Tesla sell off aggressively as well. There was a lot of talk about liquidations. We'll get some of that a little bit when we get to ETH as well. Over there on Binance, we saw their Bitcoin US dollar perpetual swap that saw about $1 billion worth of long positions getting called in just in the first couple of days of last week. So these sell-offs, people are obviously very highly levered, very highly margined out there in some of these products. So big aggressive sell-offs, that's going to leave some marks on the P&Ls of some folks out there. Seems to have stabilized, pun intended, at least for now, around the 48,000 level. But wait 5 minutes and the weather can change out there in the crypto landscape. Bill, it's been a couple of weeks since you joined us. Obviously, a lot has gone on since you joined us last time. The news of the Musk and crypto alliance, pretty much, or Bitcoin alliance, was fresh, hot off the presses at that point. But obviously, over the course of the past few weeks, we've seen some interesting forays in both directions. What was lighting up your tape over the past couple of weeks, sir?
Well, I would say that in general, I don't get a lot of emails or inbound phone calls in the cryptocurrency space in general. But when the Elon Musk news hit and the prices began to break through 50,000, 52, 53. I think maybe even the all-time high was 57,000 kind of intraday in Bitcoin. But again, what's coming across my tape is, I think being a floor trader, Mark, a former floor trader, we are always suspicious about the, buy the rumor, sell the news kind of thing.
Oh, no, the technology gods not smiling on Mr. Bill. Mr. Bill always has challenges out there in his little neck of the woods over there. We'll see if we can get Mr. Bill back to join us again forthwith. Mr. Bill, are you back, sir?
I'm here.
There you go. All right. Start from the top, sir.
Starting from the top. Well, we, as former floor traders, we kind of lived by the adage of buy the rumor, sell the news. And when all the news was coming out with Elon Musk, Michael Saylor, more and more of that FOMO that you caught on the news, it just seemed as though I'm always suspicious of those type of rallies. I like the slow and steady creepers where people aren't paying that much attention. So, I'm a little suspicious of the rally, something I wanted to fade and did fade a little bit, but now we're right down to the middle of the bell curve. I think kind of fair value for Bitcoin for now. So I just love the way the news media portrays, people like Musk and Dogecoin and things like that. It's not comical, but it's really interesting content.
Yeah, I remember you had some comments about Dogecoin last time. I think we have some listener comments about that as well. Let's get into the world of all things Bitcoin here. Obviously, it's been a volatile period in the world of Bitcoin. On our last show, we saw Bitcoin hovering right about 109%. Remember, that's the 1 hour vol coming at you courtesy of our friends over there in Genesis Volatility Land, aka GVol. AKA the folks who have a cool new educational outlet over there on YouTube, the old YouTube. So if a lot of you listening to this show may not be that familiar with the world of options, maybe you want some basic options education with a little bit of crypto flavoring, Genesis Volatility is their handle over there on YouTube. Just launched interesting stuff, a whole bunch of short videos explaining how these things work in a little bit more detail. Coming into today's show, the vol was about a 97%, the 1 hour vol in Bitcoin, but we had a lot of vol obviously in between that spiked up to about a high of about 125%. That was back about a week ago, almost on the February 23rd, the big kind of panic sell off there. So Bitcoin vol got frothy, but maybe not quite as frothy as you might expect. The SKEW, the 1 hour 30-20 SKEW on our show last week was about almost a negative 0.5, right around that level. Today, about a 5. Remember, of course, since our last show, February has rolled off the board. So that's going to change some of these numbers, some of the OI, some of the SKEW, everything else is going to evolve as a result of a lot of options expiring out there. Speaking of that open interest, let's get to that. Let's look at the hourly open interest. That's one of the nice things about the crypto landscape. You can't do this in Apple options or SPY options, anything like that. But you can do this in Bitcoin options because they give you hourly open interest updates. So that's a nice little thing you can sink your teeth into that you can't do in the traditional options market, at least as of yet. And coming into our last show, we had about 189,000 contracts open out there in Bitcoin land. Coming into today's show, 177,000. You may say, wait, that's weird. There's a lot less given how much action there was over the past week. But again, remember, February rolled off the board, took quite a few contracts with it. The hourly open interest spiked up to about 220,000 right before February rolled off the board. So you see there's a big chasm, almost 50,000 contracts went away with that Feb expiration. So that's why the numbers are a little bit lower. You've seen that reflected in the notional open interest as well. Our last show, there was just about slightly over 13 billion worth of notional OI outstanding across all the venues. So you're talking your DEREBITs, your BAKKTs, your CMEs, everything else out there. Come into today's show, just slightly under 10 billion. It's talking about 3 billion worth of notional wiped off the board as well. DEREBIT sold the big dog at right about exactly 8 billion worth of notional. And then number 2 is bit.com, actually 484 million. Then OKEX, 366 million. Then actually LedgerX actually managing to edge out CME a little bit by 2 million, 237 million for number 4. Then CME coming in number 5, 235 million. Again, talking about the struggles that CME has had to drive some action on the options front. In terms of how this OI is shaping up, calls versus puts out here, calls at about 98,000. Again, these numbers are going to be lighter than last show, and 85,000 on the puts. So actually calls to puts are also lining up a little bit closer than you might usually see out there. Usually Bitcoin very call heavy, but these days with Feb rolling away and some of these other months, looks like a little bit more puts are open on the board. Let's see what we had from a volume week. And a decent day on the 23rd, about 1.3 billion. Again, that's nowhere near the levels we saw not too long ago on the 17th and 19th of February. We saw 1.6 and 1.7 billion on those days. We saw 1.6 billion again on the 29th of February. So this past week, we got in the ballpark, I would say around 1.3 billion. That was about the high of the week. Every other day was much lower. So it wasn't outside the 23rd. It actually wasn't perhaps as active of a week as you might expect. Bill, does that come as a surprise to you? And then maybe some of these other numbers, the OI and the vol, given everything we saw over the course of the past week, or is that pretty much what you expected, sir?
I kind of expected things to slow down a little bit, to be honest with you, Mark. You know, you had mentioned on the last show gargantuan open interest and out of the money call options that were just huge in number. And we blew past those numbers, and those options went deep in the money. And so, you know, when you get those kind of moves, and I think it caught a lot of people by surprise, you have to expect a little bit of a return to the middle, like a little bit of calming down, a little rest for the weary, so to speak, as so much money flowed into cryptocurrencies of all types, all the altcoins, you know, Bitcoin, ETHEREUM, and the other few thousand coins that are out there all had very few exceptions were some coins, you know, on the decline. Most of them also positive, inflows, which is a positive thing. But again, Bitcoin and Ethereum, Tether, XRP, as you mentioned, just get all the news.
They do indeed. Let's see what's looking up from a monthly perspective where you folks are piling in your trades these days. Remember, February rolled off the board, took about 52,000 contracts with it, plus more if you add in all the weeklies that went away as well. So, February gone, March now the big dog, 77,000 contracts. That's up about 12,000 from what it was this time last show. So March continuing to grow. The weeklies in March also getting up there as well. Then right behind March, we've got June going back to that, crypto loves a quarter. It looks like right around 25,000 contracts. So still pretty light. But again, June's pretty far away. Hard to think all the way into summer right now, isn't it, listeners, given everything that's going on out there right now. In terms of where the OI is lining up strike-wise, the 40,000 strike continues to be the dominant player out there with about 13,300 contracts open. That actually is up a little bit from our last show, up to about 1.3 thousand. It was about 12,000 on the last show. The 48,000 strike is number 2. It's pretty much tied with the 20,000. So you got 40,000 number 1, then you got a tie for number 2 between 48,000 and 20,000. Both of them right around 9.1 thousand contracts open on each. Both of them pretty much nearly unched. I think actually the 48,000 strike came down a little bit by about 1,000 contracts. Otherwise, they're both pretty much neck and neck, which shows you the weird world we're balancing on a knife's edge right now in Bitcoin land. Is it going to be 20,000 next or 48,000? Well, 48,000 looking pretty good right now, but 20,000 is neck and neck with it, which makes it kind of fascinating. In terms of going on out to Bitcoin options, like I said, LedgerX has even edged them out from a notional volume perspective, and it seems like the biggest day last week they had on CME from an options perspective was the Tuesday. So that was the most active day, the 23rd, about 110 contracts. Every other day of the week was a lot less, 50 odd, if not less. So yeah, they continue to have problems driving flow to the options. Not so much on the futures front. The futures hot and heavy yet again. Monday, 26,000. Tuesday, the big day, 29,000 contracts on the tape. 14,000 on Wednesday, 14,000 again on Thursday, 12,000 on Friday and about 17,000, looks like on the tape coming into today. So interesting stuff, a very heavy week. And yet, Bill, another week where we're seeing an interesting dislocation, I suppose you can call it, between the futures continuing to blow the door. I mean, almost 30,000 contracts on a 5X multiple. That's a freaking lot of paper. And yet, for whatever reason, the options can't seem to catch fire over there, Mr. Bill. What are your thoughts?
I'm not really sure, Mark, to be honest with you. There's just so much new fertile ground in this space. And I really appreciate you bringing up the volume and open interest numbers in the options, because those do tend to be a magnet, right? And so it's so interesting because we see there could be potential arbitrage opportunities going around from exchange to exchange. There could be, again, that decentralized finance where firms, have Bitcoin or Ethereum locked up in lending contracts that need to be hedged. So again, I think it's not like it's not like our mom and dad's finance where it just seems so clean cut. Looking at openness and volume. So I think we need to let this space mature a little bit more before we can, I think, again, really, really wrap our arms around what does the open interest numbers really mean, and is there a way of kind of piercing through some of this decentralized finance to be able to understand what numbers really mean are important to us. I mean, I think it's, again, a work in progress as this type of digital assets become more popular. I wish I could say I could nail down exactly what this all means. But again, you have to keep very open mind of what and where these numbers are, when they appear. And you have to look at a few other assets in the meantime. So it's tougher, I think, than ever before to analyze these assets. And we may have to throw out the old books that you and I grew up with.
That might indeed be the case, sir, because you're right. Normally you see that much action on an underlying, it should translate into some paper on the options front. Yeah, for whatever reason, there seems to be a disconnect there. Speaking of disconnects, we've still been trying to figure out what's going on from a backed options perspective. So far, it's still a goose egg out there. The future is doing a little bit more paper out there. It's like they did about 1,063 contracts on their last update, courtesy of the backed volume bot out there. That puts it up about 23% from their previous report, but still not much at all. They're a one-to-one contract. So that's about 1,063 coins that were changing hands there as well. There have been rumors about BAKKT rolling into an IPO through one of these SPACs that are all the rage out there. It'll be interesting to see how these kind of anemic volume numbers translate into the IPO. Maybe vice versa. Maybe the IPO will generate a little bit of interest and get at least some of the options. Maybe a one lot of options will trade and we can have some open interest to discuss. That would certainly be nice. But now it is time for us to keep on rolling to explore the rest of the crypto landscape. It is time to explore the altcoin universe.
It's time to move beyond Bitcoin and find out what's moving the rest of the crypto marketplace. It's time to boldly venture into the altcoin universe.
All right, everybody, welcome to the altcoin universe, where we explore what's going on outside of the big dog that is Bitcoin. Let's start by breaking down the top 10. Mr. Bill, cover your ears. You may not like what's at the bottom of our top 10 here, because once again, fighting its way into the top 10 of the altcoin universe, listeners, is Dogecoin. Yes, the currency that started as a joke based on a meme, based on pretty much nonsense, now has almost $6.5 billion worth of market cap behind it. So it seemed like maybe the writing was on the wall for Dogecoin. It was selling off pretty hard, but this week, and coming into today's show at least, looking good, back in the top 10 of crypto and altcoin market cap out there. Number 9, Bitcoin Cash, 9.1 billion. Number 8, Stellar, 9.3 billion. Number 7, Litecoin, almost 11.5 billion. All in on number 6, listeners, is good old XRP, 19.8 billion. It was normally glued at number 3 for quite some time. Number 5, Polkadot, almost 31.5 billion. Number 4, Binance Coin, fighting its way up there as well. Good for 38.2 billion. Number 3 is Cardano. So Tether, not even in the top 10 conversation anymore. So a lot of back and forth in the top 10 these days. Cardano, 41.3. Number 2, ETH. That's 174, almost 175 billion. That means number 1 is the big dog. Bitcoin, 903 billion. Bill, a lot happened since our last show. First off, if you have any thoughts about Dogecoin, your favorite, fighting its way back into it only seems to pop into the top 10 when you're on the show. I think you have something to do with this. And then B, we haven't even talked about, since the last time you're on the show, Bitcoin crossed the mythical 1 trillion market cap level. So what are your thoughts on all of that?
It's absolutely unbelievable. Well, Dogecoin again. I have no comment on Dogecoin because you're right. It started out as a joke, as a parody, and I think people like to buy it. Kids like to buy it. It's like watching a troll box on some page somewhere where you're just looking. Kids that are still living at home in their parents' basements are buying and selling Dogecoin. Elon Musk, of course, made Doge. Kind of brought it a little bit more to the forefront. But as far as I know, as far as I can tell, it is not a serious project. But let me just say, it was cut and pasted from the Bitcoin platform, and you can send money faster with Dogecoin than you can with Bitcoin, which I find really interesting. But again, I don't give Doge much bandwidth in my world. In Bitcoin, in terms of $1 trillion market cap, it's absolutely fascinating to me that even I did not have expectations of $1 trillion market cap, a couple of years ago when I first learned about Bitcoin and was giving, some presentations to CPA groups and CFA groups. It seemed way beyond the pale. And now I think that $1 trillion almost seems too low for what the potential of the digital asset space can be with Bitcoin as its lead drum major. It really is. I'm very excited. I find it interesting that Bitcoin, again, this digital currency, has a market cap maybe 10 times bigger than Citigroup, 10 times bigger than many of the banks that HSBC Bank or Lockheed Martin, IBM. I mean, it's fascinating to me where we are and where we've come and what a lead technology has taken, eclipsing, traditional finance. There are no words really. And it happened so fast.
You're right. There are no words, which makes my job having to have the words very challenging. But you're right. We had a guest on not too long ago, and back when I think Bitcoin was around the 660 or so market cap level in terms of billion. And they were talking about, will it be a 1 billion asset? And we kind of joked and laughed. It didn't seem like it was in the offing anytime soon. We even did a poll about this to our audience about a month ago. So it wasn't even that long ago, Bill. It was right around the end of January, I believe. And we asked them, what do you think will hit the 1T market cap level first, Tesla or Bitcoin? It was kind of a joke poll, and we never thought of Tesla and Bitcoin joining forces, yet they have since that poll came out. One of the reasons why Bitcoin crossed that 1T level. But most of our audience picked Tesla first, and Tesla market cap is actually going to be lower now than when it was around that poll, whereas Bitcoin has been off to the races. So, yeah, we're in unprecedented, uncharted waters by just about any aspect you can look at. Speaking of rough waters out there, rough waters this week for ETH as well. Coming into Showtime, ETH regaining some of its footing at about a 1521 or so. Still puts it down about 200 handles almost exactly from our last show. But we saw a really rough week for ETH out there. They got hit pretty hard. There were some reports of some aggressive dislocations, shall we say, with some ETH actually being crossed over there on Kraken as low as $700 in the height of the panic of last week. So if you got liquidated at 700, I feel for you. That's horrific, especially given where we are now, over double that level. So that's what happens sometimes in these frothy markets, listeners. People start panicking. The margin calls start coming in. You have to liquidate. You are being forced to liquidate. I don't think anyone had the choice to dump it at 700, but those are some of the levels we saw. I think that was a very brief blip, obviously, but still, it did get down to those levels in the height of the panic out there. Mr. Bill, I know you watch ETH a little bit. What are your thoughts about its turbulence over the past week and some of the news of some people being forced out as low as 700 over the past week, sir?
Well, as a former risk manager, I know how it must feel when you have to liquidate client accounts right at the time where you want to even double up or triple up on your position. So I definitely feel for those people. But again, like most of these platforms, they execute almost automatically. There's no risk manager really previewing these closing only positions. It's pretty much done, at the market using a type of algorithm, because when you're liquidating hundreds or thousands of accounts, you can't look at every single one and decide whether it was a bad mark or was it really, somebody going, as we used to say, going tapioca, right? Somebody going bankrupt. And so Ethereum's low trade, it makes me want to trade the night session, right? I mean, so much action happens in the evening hours, very similar to the S&P 500, very similar to our futures contracts, where the evening and night show really had the volatility, and the market just, when we would open up in the morning, would just kind of catch up. So Here we have digital asset markets are open 24/7, 365, yet the human beings need to sleep. But I tell you, I think I'm going to be spending more of my evening hours watching cryptocurrency prices rather than binge watching Netflix.
Might be more profitable. Could be more dangerous, I suppose. It depends on your viewpoint out there. But you're right. Interesting stuff afoot in the wee hours over there in all things crypto. Let's dive into ETH, how it performed over the past week outside of those somewhat aberrant liquidations at roughly half the value it's trading at right now. On our last show, ETH was pretty frothy. ETH has been frothy for a while. It's about 132% vol. This show is about 120%, so it's coming a little bit. Of course, in the interim, particularly in the height of those liquidations, it got up to about 165%. So ETH is an extremely volatile asset, and it still remains at that level. 30-20 SKEW, that's, of course, the entire strip of options, the 30 delta all the way down to the 20 delta. If you don't know what that means, listeners, check out our educational content on the network, including Options Bootcamp, Options Playbook Radio. Maybe check out those new educational videos and the folks over there at Genesis Volatility. So last show was about roughly flat, about negative a quarter, really. Wasn't much going on. And then this past week, about 3.2 today. So a little bit of a change. Remember, that SKEW is going to evolve with so much OI going off the board with February. In terms of where the volume was this week, outside of the 23rd, that was the most active day. And that was, I think, a new volume high. That was about 395 million worth of notional volume going up on DEREBIT. That's a lot. Compare that to the end of January. We saw about 286 million worth of notional. So we have seen high levels, but nothing like that level. So that, of course, that panic sell-off, that really drove a lot of paper, almost 400 million with a notional. That's a new high, I do believe, out there. If you add in all the other venues, you're talking about 450 million, closing in on 500, $500 million worth of notional action going up out there these days. Let's see how it breaks down. Outside of DEREBIT, there really aren't a lot of other size players in ETH. The other size notional players are OKEX with about 6 million and Bit.com with 6.6 million. So DEREBIT has about 131 million out there. So you're talking a big chasm between DEREBIT and everyone else when it comes to the ETH landscape. In terms of OI, how it's looking out there on DEREBIT right now, 783,000 contracts open on the call side. It's down to about 21,000. And the puts, 580,000. That's down to about 45,000. Again, February rolling off the board, taking some OI with it. That's also reflected in the hourly OI as well. Last show is about 1.41 million. Coming into today is about 1.34 million. So off a bit, but not a ton out there. Obviously, the market's already recovering some of that action. If you're looking at what the number one overall, before we do that, even let's look at the total OI from an overall hourly perspective. I do like the hourly OI because it's always fascinating to watch. And again, I like being able to do it because you can't do it in your traditional Apple, or you have to wait every day. You only get your updates in traditional options market from an OI perspective once a day, listeners. So this is kind of nice to be able to sink your teeth into hourly updates on the crypto front. And last week we saw February had 313,000 contracts open. That's all gone now. So now March is the big dog with 434,000 contracts open out there in terms of where things are open from an overall expiration cycle perspective. In terms of the strikes, this has been a weird one. It continues to be a weird one, a bit of a head scratcher for me, because the 400 strike continues to dominate the OI out there in ETH. As I said, we're at about a 1,500 right now. And even at the lowest levels it got crossed at, it was around 700. So yet the 400 strike continues to dominate. I am pleased to see they took off a little bit. They took off about 4,000 contracts. There's about 83,000 contracts still open on the 400 strike. If you know anything about options, of course, that strike is now effectively the underlying. It's the future. It's ETH. So this run, obviously they want to keep some more exposure on. 320 strike also very active. 320 strike and 480 strike are kind of tied for number two with about 67,000 contracts open each. The 320 strike is about the same as from last week, and the 480 strike has actually come down nearly 10,000 contracts. So that's what you got for number two. You got to go all the way down to number three effectively, or technically number four, but number three if you add 320 and 480 there at number two spot. The 1600 strike, that's got about 55,000 contracts. That's down about 12,000 as well. So a lot of OI coming off the board, obviously reflected in these numbers, but still, still fascinating that the 400 strike, the 320 strike, and the 480 strike are still top of the charts here from an overall ETH perspective. I know we talked about this before, Bill, But it remains the case, and it still flummoxes me that these deep in the money contracts are still what dominates the charts out there in ETH, sir. Have you come to grips with that since your last appearance, sir, or are you still as flummoxed as I am, sir?
Well, I think of it in terms of, again, we all have to kind of view these things with our own experiences. And I remember when I was trading corn options and futures back at the Board of Trade for a few years, that a very desirable position to have on was to long the futures contract and short deep in the money calls when the market was rallying, because you received the credit balance on the cash that your short call was generating, but you didn't really have to pay anything other than just normal margin on the long futures contract. It wasn't like on the security side where they charged you one rate for the long stock and you received the lesser rate on the credit balance. So for me, like whoever's long Ether and short these calls, they're like, I'm not going to say they're getting a free ride, but they're kind of getting a free ride by collecting this huge credit interest on their short calls. And maybe the contract isn't designed that way, on some of the other exchanges, but that was one of the beauties of, again, being there on the floor. It was something that we may or may not wanted when we were at the CBOE, but definitely something we wanted at the Board of Trade. So again, we don't know where these contracts are, where the assets were lent. Did someone take out a mortgage on, use their Ether as a collateral for a smart contract or some decentralized finance in order to not pay capital gains on Ether? So there's a lot of stuff going on in the background with Ethereum, because it's kind of like a mortgage contract as well as it is its own operating system, as well as it is, oil that runs these contracts. So, we just don't know, and I don't know if we're ever going to know.
Yeah, it has been a fascinating issue. It continues to be. It's a perplexing one. I like that notion about you're an old school covered call, guys. I had a feeling you might have some thoughts along those lines. And no, you were slinging corn back in the day. Interesting stuff. Also interesting out there in the XRP land, though perhaps not the direction that the Ripple bulls would have liked, down about 17 cents this week, right around the 43-cent level coming into showtime. XRP has done this dance for a while. It gets up to 60 odd, 70 odd, maybe. Then it comes right back down, gets up, comes right back down. There's always a slew of negative headlines again, or perhaps it seems like there's some lurking and willing sellers up there at that level as well. Either way, XRP has always had trouble breaking much north beyond that level, outside of that one brief period where it traded in the north of $3 range very briefly. Haven't retraced those levels yet again. And XRP doesn't seem like it's doing it this week. Bitcoin Cash down about 117 from our last show, and Bitcoin SV down about 24.5. And now it's time, listeners, to bring you folks onto the show and answer some of your crypto questions.
You've got questions about crypto. Who doesn't? It's time to find out the answers to your crypto questions.
All right, everybody, welcome to the crypto questions segment. That is indeed the portion of the program where we break down and answer all of your questions. And we have quite a few of them here on the old program today. Let's see if we can get into it, because we have some comments for you, Mr. Bill. On your last show, when you were on with us, you made some comments about Tesla joining with Bitcoin. So you don't like it when companies get out of their core competencies. I'm more negative in Bitcoin and Tesla now as a result. We had Richard Bruce chiming in saying they hold cash on the balance sheet and now they hold some Bitcoin. What competency are we talking about? One is fixed in supply, aka Bitcoin. The other, US dollar, is being printed at an exponential rate. The Bitcoin sits there and life goes on, does not affect the Tesla business. And then we have Cash & Co. chiming in saying he's laughing his butt off as Elon says, Tesla is a collection of 12 different startups. Looks like crypto is a new division of that collection, along with a whole bunch of unicorn emojis. And then we had someone else chiming in here with, what was your Doge comment? I'll have to find where that went right now. But we had someone else chiming in. She said you didn't like Doge, Bill, as I recall. And they said you should just put $500 worth of Doge in your back pocket and hold on to it for a rainy day. He thought that was a low risk investment. So there you go, Mr. Bill. You're getting a lot of response from our audience, sir.
Well, listen, I really appreciate that. And again, it's just when I hear things like nobody would have been surprised if Elon Musk purchased Swiss francs or euro dollars or other currencies in order to quote unquote hedge something with Tesla, right? To me, that's a sound business decision. but to move some of the treasury reserves off the balance sheet into Bitcoin. And even then, if you follow Caitlin Long, there's some gap accounting issues that.
The technology gods not smiling on Mr. Bill. Let's see if the fifth time can be the charm as we go on into our friends over there, Genesis Vol, gvol.io, the place to check them out. They chimed in with a screen grab. I'm not sure where this is from. They said, what do you think about these efficient markets? And they sent a link to, looks like just a single strike here. A single strike somewhere on, I'm not sure what this is. This is ETH, the 500. So it looks like the 500 strike. And these appear to be extremely wide. No bid at $267 on the call side and similar levels on the put side. It's hard to tell what asset or what this exchange this is from. But yes, GVOL folks, this does look like it's a pretty crazy market. But again, I don't know what this is from outside of just the madness. It's showing a 113% volatility, though. So could be ETH. Sounds like an ETH level out there, but hard to tell. But interesting stuff nonetheless. It kind of gets back to what we were talking about before, listeners, with kind of some of the challenges of of navigating these markets, particularly if you're a newcomer having to deal with, shall we say, the less than liquid aspects of some of these markets is a bit of a challenge. Here we got regular listener Scott Somer chiming in. He was asking the folks at DEREBIT, and he wanted to copy us so we could see it too, it looks like. He wanted to know from them when they will be available and usable, as he puts it, for U.S. citizens. That's a big question. We've been putting that to the DEREBIT folks for a while. I want to get them on the show to actually pick their brains about that, because obviously they're the big dogs. They're the 800-pound gorilla in the crypto derivative space. As we mentioned, they do all the OI, all the flow is still there. Other venues that we've heard of and they're listed in the U.S., like CME, having some struggles getting some traction. So I would love to hear more from them about exactly what their plans are for the U.S., what their thoughts are. Obviously, a lot of that's out of their hands in terms of the regulatory side. They don't control what the regulators are going to allow here in the U.S., but still, it would be nice to see the 800-pound gorilla in the space be viable for the largest trading community on the world, which is, of course, the U.S. right now. I've said it before. I'll say it again. This asset has gone from sub $1 to north of 50,000 without any real appreciable options market that is viable for the U.S. audience. I know overseas you guys are having the ball slinging DEREBIT. Maybe you used to be on Binance, maybe not so much anymore. Some of these other ones out there, BitMEX, of course. But for the U.S. audience, which is obviously the largest options audience on the planet, there's been effectively nothing. And that's a shame. That's a borderline crime. The asset that has this much volatility, this much underlying price movement, and to force people to go into the Delta 1 equivalents, that's never been my preference. You couldn't short the thing for every hit did. You had to short the underlying. You couldn't use options to do it. It was not a good scenario. So it's a shame we've had this much movement, this much action, this much volatility, and no real way for a lot of the U.S. audience to really sink their teeth. And to speak of the U.S. audience, Scott also asking, he wants to know if Gemini is going to start a digital asset option marketplace. We've had Gemini on a number of times. We haven't heard anything about that, though, Scott. So maybe we'll have to reach out to them again and get them back on the show to pick their brains about what their plans are for the digital options. I would love to see more options marketplaces here. That would imply, of course, more options tradable in the crypto space for the U.S. audience. So I would love to see that. Hopefully that is the case. We'll round it out here with maybe some words of warning from Perps. Perps says, stock/crypto do not only go up. Some of you out there in the audience, he says, need to hear this. Yes, that is true. Mr. or Mrs. Perps, they do tend sometimes to go down. But these are good words to listen to, as we have the hodlers out there. Certainly we get mad at that. But yeah, sometime maybe if you have the 400 strike open, for example, in ETH, maybe you take some of that off. Take some of your profits and live to fight another day. Well, actually, I lie. I'll wrap it up with this one from J3 Dingle, another regular listener. He sends in, I think, a somewhat tongue-in-cheek question. He wants to know when he'll be able to buy naked calls on this particular asset. And he sends a link to, shall we say, a crypto asset that is used in the adult space. So obviously the naked call buying, bit of a pun intended. I don't think, J3 Dingle, I don't think you should hold out for options on that anytime soon. Not exactly the most liquid asset, but hey, it's a fledgling part of the space. And who knows, someday maybe We'll have options to trade on all of these things. All right, everybody. Unfortunately, that music means we've come to the end of another epic run through the world of the crypto rundown. He has been plagued, nay, beset by technical problems. Let's see if we have him back one final time. Mr. Bill, are you there, sir?
I am here.
There he is. So before the technology god smites you yet again, sir, if folks are intrigued, they want to reach out to you. Maybe they want to talk about Bitcoin or your favorite Doge or ETH, or indeed the intersection of traditional finance with digital assets. Where should they go? What should they do, sir?
Well, they can contact us at CENACLEcapital.com or telephone us at 847-686-4800. That's 847-686-4800. You can look for me on LinkedIn or Twitter as well, and contact me through any one of those mediums.
There you go. Give him a follow over there on the old Twitters as well at CENACLE Capital. And on behalf of Mr. Bill and our friends over there at Genesis Volatility, and indeed myself, I want to thank all of you out there for downloading, streaming, subscribing, for listening live, for sending in your questions, tongue-in-cheek and serious as well. And we'll see you back here tomorrow, of course, Interview Tuesday, Education Wednesday with OPR and Options Bootcamp on Wednesday. I think for the audience of this program, those shows are definitely up your alley. Of course, Thursday, episode 2 of this week, or episode 2 of the Option Block, and of course this week in Futures Options. Friday, Volatility Views. Then it all kicks off again next Monday, another episode of the Crypto Rundown.
This program is brought to you by Genesis Volatility, also known as GVOL, home of institutional-grade crypto options analytics. Whether you're trading CeFi options or DeFi options, cryptocurrencies move. Use GVOL Analytics to analyze implied volatility, model realized volatility, structure positions, and unlock alpha. For more information, visit gvol.io. That's GVOL.io. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.